Hey everyone, welcome back to Deeper Roots. Happy New Year! We made it, you made it, and we're all super happy that we're here together in this new year. New Year's means new beginnings, and unless you've been living under a rock, or you're just from another culture, which is okay, in which case you should know, we'd like to do these New Year's resolutions every year, because right about now seems like a good time to let the new year mean a new goal. But is the idea of a New Year's resolution biblical? Is it something that we should do as Christians? Let's talk about it. Do you have a question or a topic? We'd love to talk about that too. Submit it to www.iebbvn.org/deeperroots so you can be a part of the next episode. Also, you can catch the rest of our episodes in the other platforms that we're streaming on. Thank you for joining us here on Deeper Roots. Let's get to the conversation. Back to Deeper Roots. I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Happy New Year to everyone. Today we have myself, we have Pastor Luis, and we also have Esther here as well recording the podcast. I know this time last year we actually were on a little hiatus, but this time we're just blowing through the holiday season. But we did want to it's because we wanted to talk about the new year. Today's on the topic of New Year's. And we want to talk about a few topics, including new goals, like New Year's resolutions, leaving the past behind, all that kind of stuff. So, Pastor, do you want to get us started?
All right, welcome. And as you can hear, my throat's not exactly clear yet. I've been sick, as many people in our church. So hopefully this new year, you will start out with some health. It's this December, we've been going through a lot of, colds and a flu, and it's just that type of year. So hopefully you're staying nice and healthy. But as we start 2023, our topic today is on the topics of New Year's, and we just want to talk about a little bit about what it means to try to biblically and as a Christian try to form goals and try to start out the new year right. So when it comes to New Year's, we all hear about New Year's resolutions, right, Esther? Mm-hmm. So let's just ask you, have you ever done New Year's resolutions?
Yes.
How about you, Brother Derek?
I actually have one for this year.
You have one. Okay, so we've all done resolutions. So what's your experience with resolutions, Esther?
With the years, I've learned not to give myself something too big. Goals have to be achievable, attainable, and not so big that I won't reach it. Small goals, attainable goals work better than big goals without a plan.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Derek?
I think that's probably the reason why most of mine don't work. And I have definitely gone on the side of maybe I just don't call this like a year goal. I just call it like something I just need to work toward. Like I've stopped calling a lot of like my ventures like New Year's resolutions. Like for example, if I wanted to start working out, right? But like, for New Year's resolution, I'm gonna go sign up for the gym. Like, or that's not, or I'm gonna start going to the gym. Like that typically doesn't end up working. If I have the idea like I need to go, I should probably go to the gym soon, I will just go to the gym without making it a New Year's resolution. Mm-hmm. And then so it's definitely harder for me to find something that will satisfy what I think a good New Year's resolution is, because I would want that New Year's resolution to end up becoming a lifestyle change. Mm-hmm. And most of the time, at least when it comes to a lot of my older resolutions, that just hasn't happened.
It seems like when it comes to New Year's, I think New Year's is always a good time to be able to sort of plan out or want to do a little goal setting, for the year, or things you wish to do for the year. Because I think it is a very unique time of the year. And I think God, in his sovereignty and his wisdom, designed for there to be, a certain cycles, like weeks and months, but then years, because it sort of gives you a fresh new start, right? want to try to do something new and stuff. And there's a lot of traditions also involving like the end of a year, right? When people like burn things and they want to get rid of or write things down, and they want to sort of like shoo away the bad spirits from the old year. And of course, some of these are pagan practices. But when it comes to forming new resolutions for the new year, would we say it's biblical? What do you think, Esther?
Are goals biblical? Is that the question?
Yeah, New Year resolutions, saying, hey, this year I want to do this and this and this, and sort of like, should a Christian sit down and try to set goals every New Year? What do you think?
I do think so. I think in the past, maybe in the Bible, you can see it. It's not biblical. I'm sorry. It's not calendar. Like, it's not like, hey, it's New Year. Here's my goal. But I do think it is a biblical foundation. Like, God, forgive us every day. Every day is a new beginning, right? Like all these phrases, all these opportunities that God gives us. I do think it is a Christian lifestyle we should be having. I believe everyone should have the same practice, just maybe differently, meaning some start at the beginning of the year. Like Derek says, that doesn't work for me. I need like smaller goals. I need like every 2 weeks or 2 months. So I do believe what works best for people might be a little bit different, but I do think it is a practice and a lifestyle for a believer.
Mm-hmm. How about you, Derek?
I'm thinking that it is biblical to an extent where God encourages us to continue growing, whether it's in who He has designed us to be, or who we ought to be in Him.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the growth is definitely a big part of God's design for us. And how are we going to grow if not with goals?
Mm-hmm.
And whether we want, like, the New Year's resolution tradition isn't biblical, but it's not anti-biblical. It's not like against the Bible. It's another quote excuse to make a goal for ourselves.
Yeah, like I said, it's not biblical in the sense in that to do it at New Year's time.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But as a lifestyle, definitely, yeah, we're supposed to be conscious of time, of life being as a gift. And like it says, redeeming the time. The Bible says we must redeem the time, live each day with purpose. In Latin, it's carpe diem, seize the day, where you're supposed to try to each day make it count for something. And sometimes what ends up happening, when we don't live with goals, when we're not practiced at goal setting, and we're all guilty of that, then what's the consequences of that is time wasted, right? And when it comes to life, I guess everybody at New Year's time wants to think of like, okay, a fresh start, a new beginning, and that is positive, right? But then the negative part is also, there's 1 year less on Earth,
Mm-hmm.
we're 1 year less, one less year that has gone by, that we haven't maybe attained what we've goaled ourselves to do. And sometimes it's because of lack of disciplines, lack of planning and stuff like that. I want to share a couple of verses just on that. When it comes to having plans, right? The Bible says in Luke 14:28, when it talks about building the tower, it says, nobody goes to build a tower without first, planning. You have to plan it out. You have to have a goal in mind of what you want to do before you actually do it, And sometimes I marvel at, like how long things take even in modern times, like people say, oh, we're going to build something and it's going to take so many years to build. I'm like, man, it takes that long, Or like right now, the NASA thing to the moon, I just came back, right? The first mission that came back unmanned, and then the next one's planned for 2025 or 2024, I'm not sure, but I'm like, is it going to take that long to do another one? But of course they have to take all this time to go through the data and see what worked, what didn't work, because before they actually put a man on the capsule, right?
They want to make sure that all that training doesn't die. Yeah.
Exactly. So they actually have to plan every single detail and work on the data that they're looking through and stuff like that. And when it comes to actually getting somewhere and accomplishing a lofty goal, it always requires planning. The opposite is also like what Proverbs 6:6 says through 11. It says, "Go to the ant, O sluggard, consider her ways and be wise. Without having any chief, officer, or ruler, she prepares her bread in summer and gathers her food in harvest. How long will you lie there, O sluggard? How will you arise from your sleep? A little sleep, a little slumber, a little folding of the hands to rest, and poverty will come upon you as like a robber, and want like an armed man." So, what if you were to share what's your best advice when it comes to goal setting? What would you share with someone, Esther, that you've learned as far as goal setting and being able to keep your goals or to accomplish some goals?
I think I would start with asking the difference between spiritual goals and physical, like worldly goals, right?
Secular goals, not
secular,
non-religious goals, stuff like that.
Because I think that's also something we have to be reminded as believers. Sometimes we focus so much on the secular and forget about the spiritual. So I think that's the first thing I would say, and I would challenge everyone to do one of each. And then, as I was saying before, you want attainable goals. Something, don't say, I'm going to read the Bible every day for 5 hours, right? Like, you have, if you're not reading your Bible at all right now, 5 hours is not going to happen. I can already tell you that. So I think just not setting yourself up for failure regarding how big your goal is, but being realistic and also challenging. Don't say, okay, I'm going to read 2 minutes, right? Like, you have to find that balance for, we talk about balance all the time at church, right? About that balance of not super easy, but a little bit challenging, because that's part of a goal, right? To sort of challenge yourself to do better, to do more, whatever it may be. I think that is. And if it's possible, I would also say, share someone your goals so they can be like, hey, how's it going? Because I think also having someone encourage you or just asking you how's it going is also helpful to motivate you in reaching those goals and working towards those goals. Also, I mean, I know people that do goals together, like every Tuesday we're going to get together and we're going to So I think there's so many things that you could do, and it's figuring out what works best for you. But my big one would be challenging believers for a spiritual goal and a secular goal. Again, attainable type of goal. I
like what you said about the spiritual goals, because yes, you're right. Many times people do put so much emphasis on like, oh, I'm going to lose weight, or I'm going to get a degree this year, or whatever, which is great, but sometimes we forget the spiritual, right? The spiritual side of things. And like you said, that's a good advice, do one of each. For every secular one, do a spiritual one, because I've always thought of it like a pyramid. There's the pyramid, the base of the pyramid is the spiritual life. And when we disregard the spiritual, for as much as we try to be well in the emotional and psychological area, which is the inner man, or the physical area, we're still going to be missing that spiritual part, which is the base of it all. So we have to be very strong in that. So I think that's really good. What would be one of the goals you would advise people to do for themselves spiritually?
Well, I think it depends where they're at. I think the majority of Christians and believers, sadly, are not reading their Bible. So I think that would be my first question. Prayer is also a big one that's really hard. I say personally that I would say, okay, which one do you really want to work? Which one do you have to work on? And go from there. Those are my two big ones. And then depending on the person and a little chat, you could figure out if those two they're doing well, then, we could go into something else, because I think that encompasses, if you're reading your Bible, God's going to speak to you about specifics in your life, and prayer obviously also helps. So, I think I would start there with a conversation with someone about goals.
Yeah, I think that's like the equivalent of bread and water, right? The two elements of life, you know, you eat, you drink. Without those two, doesn't matter how much goals you have about getting a degree and getting this and stuff, you're going to die, right? So it's the same thing spiritually. I think sometimes we have all these lofty goals, spiritual goals, but it all starts with having those two basics down, you know, which is prayer and time in the Word, you know. And today, you know, it's not so much that you necessarily have to sit down and read a chapter of the Bible, although of course it's great because that you study the Bible systematically. But even if it's a difficult day, you can listen to a devotional on the way to work on your podcast, or you can listen to this podcast or something to get your mind fed on the Word of God. And there's so much today, right? There's so much when it comes to apps, when it comes to sermons, when it comes to just being able to access the Word today. There's no lack of access today. It's just the lack of interest and time in people's lives today. So Derek, what's your best advice that you would give as far as goal setting?
I just want to have the listener just rewind back to Esther's section. You're a teacher. Like, I think that's one of those things that like you just basically like honed down, especially to teach like the young ones that you have. I think that I want to also go back to it being extremely important to have those both. That's something I also consistently fail at, just like being able to do both the goals. It's always
a spiritual
like
and
the spiritual
secular.
and the secular. It's like Pastor said, like it's so easy to just like I have my lofty like physical goal, but my spiritual goal I either don't even think about or I don't consider to just be like, okay, this one could be let go. It could be let go for like next year, next month, or whatever. I think that it's important not only to have goals that are reasonable and goals that are attainable, but also that are important to you. Like, I know that kind of just sounds a bit like unnecessary because like, of course, like if I have a goal, it's not going to be important to me, but at least for people who I guess might be like me, who are like, oh, it's New Year's, I should probably do something different this year, then it might just end up becoming like I just got something. It's like a gift, like it's like a gift for someone that you don't necessarily like, but like you're giving them a gift for Christmas. You don't really know them or something like that, so you just give something. Same thing with like New Year's resolutions. Like, don't just give something. Care about the thing that you want to do. Like, there's got to be something on your mind, whether it is physical or spiritual. You got to care about these things. Yeah, there's a passion about whether it is like for me, like a goal of mine spiritually would be like I want to get to understand the Old Testament more, because so much of the Old Testament is difficult to understand, but also at the same time, like it is the historical basis for what the New Testament has to offer. And I think that would be a good idea for me to do that, like as a teacher in the youth group. I need to learn more about this, or else I won't have like a good backing for what I'm actually teaching. There's no cultural backing for the New Testament stuff. And like I care about that, but obviously, like if I were maybe any other person, I might say, oh, I'm just gonna read my Bible every day, and then I'm just gonna I'll read Genesis 1 today, and then either you're gonna quit in Leviticus, or you're going
Numbers.
to or Numbers, or you're going to like, oh, I'm just gonna read a chapter a day. Great, fantastic goal. But like, if your goal is to read the entire Bible in a year, and you don't take time to prepare for it because you're not passionate enough for it, you're gonna catch yourself slipping at some point.
Yeah. You have to have some planning, right? And what you want to do.
Yeah, like there's planning, but there's also just like the passion brings planning.
Yeah, exactly. And making sure there's, like you said, the attainable goals too, because sometimes the lofty goals are hard. I wanted to go back to something you said too, before I forget. You said about helping or having someone help you with goals or keep accountability. And that's always great, but have you ever had to be the person to keep someone accountable, as far as someone says, hey, Esther, I want to lose 10 pounds. Can you keep me accountable? And have you? Just yes or no first?
Yes.
Okay, so my question to you is, what are the limitations that someone who is keeping someone accountable should keep in mind? Because I think sometimes when it comes to like, oh, hey, for example, the losing weight, okay, Derek, I want you to help me keep accountable this year. I'm going to try to lose 25 pounds and stuff, right? And he's all right, so cool. So maybe he's going to be asking me, did you sleep well? Did you go walking today and stuff like that? But is there a limit to where you should also respect? Because, like one of the things I've heard before is, it's like when someone asks, especially when it comes to dieting, it's like, you don't want someone sort of like be over everything you eat. Hey, don't touch that. Don't eat that, So is there a limit?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You can't make anyone do anything. That's something that I've learned with time. And I think as a person who holds someone accountable, and it also depends your relationship with them. Yeah. That's another one, right? So if it's someone who I know well, it's going to be more of an not that I won't be encouraging to someone else, but my text will be something like, hey, how did you go for a walk today? Like very positive type. And then if, after 2 weeks I don't hear anything and I see that person, I make time to see that person and say, hey, how's it going? Are you going through something? What's going on? What do you need? Like that. And in that conversation, I might find out, hey, they really don't want me to hold them accountable, or they just want maybe a text once a week. I think it's, depending on the person and what they truly want. Because sometimes people say, yeah, I want to be held accountable, but they really don't. Exactly. Right? Like one thing I do with the young people, the college and career Derek's class, is hold them accountable for themselves. So at the beginning of the year, for example, in 3 weeks when we have Sunday school next year, they write a letter to themselves of what their goals is, what they hope to do, and they seal it. And I mail that to them, snail mail it to them in March, April, something around there. And then that's their accountability. Like it's something personal, so they can write whatever they want. And I do always challenge them, one spiritual, one not. And it's one way for them to think about accountability of themselves and how they're doing, and what they do afterwards, maybe checking in with the leader or with them, whatever they need, they can go from there, because they're adults. I can't make them do anything, but they can't say no one tried. And I think that's always in the back of my head. You have opportunities. That's what I'm trying to give you, in a gentle way with the letter.
I think what you just said too is good about also just again another example of the importance of small shorter goals, because when you said that about the letter, it jogged my memory about this letter we did in the year 2000 with my family. My tia Laura asked us to write a letter to ourselves, and for 10 years later we're going to open it. I forgot about it already. And all the things you wanted to do, where you saw yourself in 10 years, blah, 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 blah. And then 2010 comes around and she actually had them, and she got us and gave us a letter. But I felt so, it's deflating. I'm like, oh man.
10 years seems a little too much for me, but I'm an A-type.
It was so deflating because I'm like, no, I'm not even close to where I thought I was going to be.
This is why I think, for the most part, short, attainable goals makes more sense. There are some people who can do that, who can do years, and kudos to them. I'm not one of them. Hence why I normally give them April, May, around there, when I mail them their letter.
Now I want to read this verse right here and tell me what this verse teaches us regarding goal planning or goal making and stuff. Proverbs 16:9, it says, in his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. In his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps. So what's that verse mean?
I think the verse definitely is more about like the... Dang it. All right, I'm going to bring up this. I have this saying that I've heard. I'm going to bring it up again. I think I might have said it like 2 or 3 times already in this show, but in the podcast, but it's like pray to God and strap your camel, where it's like you still pay attention to God. God is still like the ultimate decider of things, but you're also the one responsible for what you do, right? And in terms of like this in terms of this one, this verse, it's like you are preparing yourself for like your plan. You're making the not plan, but like you have your goals. You're preparing yourself for your goals, and your course. You're like tying your shoes, all this stuff. But God is the one who's going to giving you the directions, and the course, and the goals need to be based off of what God's directing you.
Okay, Esther, what do you think? What principle is being taught here? Let me read it again. And it says, Proverbs 16:9, in his heart a man plans his course, but the Lord determines his steps.
The immediate thought for myself was our passions. Like God, like we have our passions. You know, I like to organize. I like people. I like relationships and building relationships. And using those passions, how God uses those passions in your life to be who he wants you to be, right? Like sometimes we think, oh, this should happen. And it's still using your passion and your goals, but God might say, no, not that way, this way. So it's still just using what you have already. I agree with Derek was also saying, but my initial response to that one was, God, we have our passions, which, makes us think like this should be my goal, right? Like me who's, a teacher, I thought I was going to have kids and get married and all that stuff. And God said, oh, we're going to use that gift, but in this way. And it wasn't what I thought it was, right? So it's still using the gifts that I have, but in a different way, and being open to the changing of those steps, right? You think you're going this way and God's gonna be like this way, and you might not understand, but you're open and willing to follow him in that way.
Trust, right?
Yes.
Oh, that's hard.
It's not an easy thing.
Yeah, and for me, the word that comes out from that verse to me is the principle is of being flexible. That we do have a responsibility to plan. We do have a responsibility to try to set goals and everything. But understand that sometimes those plans, for as much as you do your part, they might not turn out exactly how you planned.
Correct.
And you have to allow for flexibility, especially when it's God that's moving things or bringing something to your life that you did not expect, and not hit yourself over the head for not being able to reach exactly the goal you wanted, but also go with the flow sometimes, so it's sort of like a yin and a yang, right? Like a balance between the two, where you have to be disciplined in planning, setting goals, doing your part, but also when God intervenes and there's something else, you have to go with the flow and trust. That's the word, right? Trust God that he knows what he's doing and what he wants to do through it. An example with my friend I'm discipling, it's hard because it's like He came to this country with a whole plan of wanting to help his family in Colombia, and he has a lot of money there that they owe over there, and so that's the whole idea of being here, right? So he had his plan of trying to get a job. He got a job, blah blah blah, and everything, and then he gets hurt. So now it's been 3 months already that he's going to be without a job, and he's trying to piece all that together. Why? He had all these plans, but God knows why he allowed it to get hurt, and that's where trust has to come in. And then one thing I told him, I'm like, God's trying to use this to break something in you. I can't tell you what that is, but God wants to break something in you, and you have to know that maybe this 3 months might hurt and be painful, but there's something that is going to bring fruit and prepare you to be better equipped to meet your goals later in this coming year and stuff like that. So it's hard because especially when it comes to unexpected things, tragedies and stuff like that, you just don't know why. And you had all these plans, and then you have to just sort of surrender to God and say, God, I trust you and know what you're doing is best for me. Any other point you want to touch on?
Yeah. So we talked a lot about goals. We talked a lot about setting up new things. And I know that goals, in terms of what goals actually are, is more like we need to make lifestyle changes. But we are always talking about what we're going to add to our lives. what about stuff that we need to remove?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's important too, because sometimes a goal is not just about attaining, but also about letting go. You know, whether it's a vice, right? Whether it's a habit that was not good in our lives, whether it's a addiction, right? That we have to understand, especially when it comes to addictions. Part of it's also learning to seek help, because there's some addictions that require more accountability than others, and that's where we have to sort of learn to ask help, you know, and be able to walk that path with someone else in that. You know, one of the things we touched on, I don't know if it's for another episode. We talked about lottery and stuff like that. You know,
no, it was supposed to be for this episode, but we can do it for another one.
We'll do it for another one. But we talked about lotteries, and one of any examples. You know, sometimes people have these habits, and it might be one of their goals. You know, I need to stop buying lottery tickets this year. You know, because I've spent who knows how much money this year trying to win the jackpot, and I haven't won anything. You know, that kind of thing. You know, so there are also goals that we have to attain as far as leaving behind things that are not good in our lives, you know, sort of like the whole dieting, you know, it's dieting and being healthy. It's not just about doing more exercise. It's also about stopping eating certain things, and there's things that need to be let go, that need to be removed from your life. So it is what's it called, a goal of abstinence of things in our lives as well. Self-control.
I think that one of the this is, I think, American culture at this point, but one of the problems with, I guess, like the American culture is that with like a lot of these traditions is always very additive. It's always very like consumption, like we need to get something from this. And like I need to like my goal is to lose weight. That's an example, right? To lose 25 pounds by the end of the year. And like that's like the traditional goal, and that's good. But like, okay, yeah, technically you are losing something. You're losing weight, but it's also very like influenced goal. It's very heavily influenced by the culture around. When there's like no attention brought to the fact like, in 2023, I need to stop drinking, or I want to like reduce the amount of trash that I throw away. I want to be like, I want to, like, there's these like these removal goals, like goals that are not necessarily encouraged by like the culture, but are still super duper good for you.
They're good. I think one of the ones that comes to mind, and I think I want to challenge myself first of all this new year, is in, and I would challenge young people today, is in limiting your time on social media. You know, and I think that I see it myself. It's so, you know, I barely have a couple accounts, but sometimes it's just you scroll and scroll because you have nothing better to do. I'm like, Lord, I need to do something better than just do this in the moment, you know. And it's not so much time I do it, but it's still,
it's a habit.
I mean, it's a habit.
Yeah,
it's like, how much time should I? And then it comes to a point that, to some people, and especially youth today, if you're going through a problem, through a crisis where you really need to get God's attention on this, the Bible speaks of having a fast, right? A fast. And I think today, for young people, a fast of social media is probably much more efficient than a fast of food. You know, it's like, I think people could really consider that this year in trying to fast your social media to have a fresher look, you know. And I've had some people say, you know, I've removed it from my phone, you know, I had to throw it away, I had to get myself, and that's great, you know. And I think it's important, and doesn't mean that it can't be part of your life once it's controlled, but sometimes you have to remove it in order to be able to start afresh with it again in a more controlled manner. Well, one last thing I would say on this goal setting topic would be this. And I want to ask Esther. Esther, what do you think we should also keep in mind to when we fail our goals? Because, you know, sometimes I've come to, in my life, sometimes there's some goals that you repeatedly try to attain and you don't. And there's that tendency to want to just not try anymore on that particular area, right? So as Christians, as believers, should we ever give up on our goals?
I think it depends what goals you're thinking of. So I'm going to go with the spiritual one, right? So I think if it's something that we should be doing and you fail, let's say reading the Bible, you can't just say, forget it, I'm done. Actually, you have to. So I think you got to try something different. So if you've been trying, I was in a meeting the other day and I think even, I'm trying to think if it's a Proverbs in the Bible that talks about if you continue doing the same thing and you don't get different results, then do something different. So for example, if you're like, okay, I'm going to read a chapter of the Bible every day and it hasn't happened the last 5 years, that doesn't work for you. You got to find some other form for your goal to happen. Either, there's this thing called a Bible app that will tell you, hey, it's time to, maybe it's that, there's so many different things that you have to think about that works for you and find it so that you can do it. So when it comes to that, I think a fundamental biblical thing we should be doing, it's that. I also want to say, when you first asked me this, God gives opportunities, so giving yourself the grace, but then getting yourself back up.
Yeah,
and I always tell the young people that, like, you're going to fail. Congratulations, you're a human. The most important thing is getting up. And that getting up might take a month, 3 months, 2 days. Your hope is it's that gap of getting up gets smaller and smaller and smaller. That means you're growing, right? So I think that's important. Give yourself grace, but also understand you need to when I say get up, you need to, get disciplined in that area wherever it should be.
So when it comes to the obviously goals that we should have in our life, especially spiritual ones, never give up on those goals, but maybe reevaluate how you're trying to get there, right? Because sometimes we're trying the same thing or the same way, and sometimes, like you said, it might be, instead of trying, I'm going to read the whole Bible this year, hey, I'm going to at least try to make sure I read 5 minutes every day. Something that is more attainable and stuff, and try change your way of trying to get to the goal. And then, like you said, sometimes there's other goals that sometimes maybe the reason you're failing is because they're not in God's will. There's other goals. I want to be a music star, and it's like, God says no. And you also have to allow, like it says, God, God is the one that chooses the course we go on. We may plan, but we also have to stay flexible. Okay. Any other things?
I don't think I have anything else.
All right. Well, this was a good topic. So we really hope that you start off the new year with some excitement, with some encouragement, with positivity. We live in a world that's very negative. And I think, I don't know about you guys, but when we end a year, you sort of feel like the weight of the whole year, and you sort of feel like you're just barely getting across the finish line. It's sort of like, it's been my experience, but when the new year comes, and it's January 1st, just feels like, hey, it's a fresh new start. So I hope that's your case, that you face it with encouragement, with positivity, and that the Lord allows you to attain your goals as long as they are within His will, and that you are able to plan in a way that's attainable, and that you will rejoice in being able to get to those goals that you've set for yourself.
And here's one more goal for you to add to your list. Try submitting a question to the podcast. That's
a good goal.
That's a good goal. You
don't have to pray about that one.
We encourage these questions. If you see, in some of our, a lot of our, almost every other earlier episode that we've had, especially a lot through 2022 and pretty much all through 2021 was all question driven. We would love to hear your questions. Take a look at what episodes we've had, but maybe your question wasn't answered in those in the year and a half, 2 years that we've been recording. Maybe you have a very specific thing that you want to ask, and we're extremely open to getting those kinds of questions. You can submit those questions anonymously, and there's not even an option for payment. So this is all completely free. Submit your question to www.ibbvn.org/deeperroots. On that web, that's going to be in the description. But you can also see the other episodes that we've had on that website as well. You can see where else we're streaming in case like you found us on YouTube but you like Apple Podcasts more, you can find us there too. Or you like using Spotify more, we're there too. So send us a question, send us a topic, send us a suggestion. We would love to hear it. We hope that you can continue listening to us, and we look forward to having you listen in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to Deeper Roots. If you want to submit a question, follow up on something we talked about on the podcast, or you want to find us online, you can go to our webpage, which is ibbvn.org/deeperroots. Deeper Roots is a ministry of Iglesia Biblica Baptista Vida Nueva, which is a local church in Castro Valley, California. And you can learn more about us and our church by going to our website, ibbvn.org.